This video is about one of my all-time favorite bands, especially from the 80s. I would say they are my all-time favorite band from the 80s, the Smiths. I'm going to rank their quite short discography, for official studio albums, but also some important compilations, one could say. Let's start off with the compilations, I would say. They released several best of albums, and I think you don't need all of them, or apart from the two I'm going to mention now, any of them if you have the rest of the discography. They're a bit redundant, but they have two excellent compilations. So if you have these two plus the four studio albums, you have almost everything. You have everything. That's every great song, every great Smith song. Maybe you don't have two or three B-sides, but yeah, you don't need them. This is Hatful of Hollow. Um, this is great outtakes or live versions, live at the radio studio, and single songs, very good. I would give it 7 out of 10 points. But this is probably it's louder than bombs. Louder than bombs, in my opinion, is the you you would only need the four studio albums plus this. Then you have to picture what the Smiths are about. This has all the single A sides and B sides from tracks which aren't on the albums. Some of the greatest tracks. The Smiths were great. First and foremost, they were a great singles band. They wanted, Morrissey, also Marr. They were big fans of, the '60s culture. When the focus was more on singles, and singles weren't necessarily on albums. So you had individual singles, like the most commercial sounding songs, which weren't on the album. And the Smiths did a lot of that, and they did some great songs as single A or B sides. Some of the best, songs like Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want, Stretch Out and Wait, Sheila Take a Bow, Shoplifters of the World Unite, Is It Really So Strange, Ask. Some of the finest songs are on this. And another one before we start with the official albums is the live album Rank. It's a great live album, from near the end, shortly before they split up. It doesn't include songs from Strangeways Here We Come, their last album, but up until that, up until Queen is Dead. So great live versions of all those great songs. And now their official studio albums, number 4, I've got, this is already controversial, Strangeways Here We Come, their last album. Many people really love this album, and many people, I think there's a notion among some Smiths fans like, why did they split up after that? They were really starting to become the big band that we all thought they were going to be. And I can see where they're coming from, because with this album, it's REM around the same time with Green started their big commercial breakthrough phase, and the Smiths went in a kind of similar direction. This sounds more polished, more pop than the albums before, more mainstream pop. It's the only album that uses real strings. On the previous albums, they didn't have enough money they didn't have the production budget to have real strings, so they have those nowadays cheap sounding 80s synthy strings. So there's much to be said about this album, much positive to be said about this album, and it, like every Smiths album, contains some great songs. Girlfriend in a Coma, I Started Something I Couldn't Finish, Stop Me If You Think You've Heard This Before. Great songs, but I like the Smiths from before. I wasn't too. I was sorry for them. I think if they went on with that kind of direction, they could have become really massive, like U2, or like I said, REM in the '90s, with that sound. That's hinting in that '90s alternative rock direction. But that wasn't why I was a Smiths fan, or why I am a Smiths fan. I like the cheap sounding production from the albums before, and I like the jangle of Johnny Marr, and this is, this has less of this jangle sound and the rhythm section, the typical Smith sound. This is more like I said, like a real pop guitar pop record. Number 3 is the debut album, The Smiths. They started with already a masterpiece. I would say Strangeways Here We Come is like 8 out of 10. Louder Than Bombs is 10 out of 10, by the way. This is already 9 out of 10. So the third best album is already 9 out of 10. Classics. It's packed with classics. Hand in Glove, the first single. This Charming Man, the second single, maybe one of their all-time greatest songs, one of the greatest 80s songs. So it's a great debut album. And from now on, the top 2 albums are both masterpieces, 10 out of 10 for me. It's really hard to rank them, like what is number 1, what is number 2. I would say that my number 1 is the more important album, in the history of indie music. So this is my number 2 album, but it's almost as good as the number 1 album. It's the third album, Meat is Murder, from 1985. Again, packed with alternative pop anthems, Headmaster's Ritual, I Want the One I Can't Have. Of course, there's the big hit. They didn't really have hits during their time together, but How Soon Is Now is maybe it's their most famous song. This is the only track on the album I don't like. This is already hinting in that what the Smiths could have become in the 90s with a more commercial appeal. But again, this misses the Johnny Marr jangle sound and the innocent, more new wave punky attitude. This is more like a production, like a big rock pop production. But it's it's a fine song, but it's the least favorite from that album for me. And the number 1 album, of course, one of the greatest albums of the 80s. It was in the best autumn albums of all time ranking. I don't know which position, maybe 5, 6, or 7. The Queen is Dead from 1986. Perfect album. Like I said, one of the best albums of the 80s. Maybe one of the 25. Yeah, maybe one of the 25 best albums of all time, in my opinion. Next to How Soon Is Now, There's a Light That Never Goes Out is probably the most famous song. It's on there. But my favorite songs on that album are Cemetery Gates and The Boy with the Phone in His Side. Those are 2 of my top 5 favorite Smiths songs. That was my ranking of the Smiths. And by the way, Johnny Marr is releasing a new album we have February, so now in the next 1, 2, or 3 weeks, depends on when that video will be released. Johnny Marr releases his new solo album. I've already listened to it because I reviewed it for a monthly music magazine, German music magazine, that every now and then I'm writing for them. And Johnny Marr solo, it's hard, he's one of my most favorite pop icons, guitar player, songwriter. So I don't like to say it, but he never really had a great solo album, and this isn't too good. I gave it 2.5 stars out of 6. It was 6 is the maximum at that music magazine. It's his most ambitious solo album. It's a double album. But it's like all the albums before. The Morrissey solo albums miss Johnny Marr and the great guitar textures and the jangle I've talked about. And the Johnny Marr albums do miss the sharpness, the wit, maybe the poetic depth of Morrissey. Some people hate Morrissey, some people love him. You have to give him, he's a great songwriter and a very charismatic indie pop superstar, I would say. So I'm a fan of Morrissey and of Johnny Marr, but both never really had a masterpiece as a solo album. Morrissey had 2 or 3, I would say, great solo albums, and the new Johnny Marr album is like the previous one. Maybe it's a bit more ambitious, like I said, but it's not. It's if you're not a Smiths completist or diehard fan, you probably don't need to purchase it, but you can listen to it on Spotify. Um, this is something I wanted to show you. It's a guitar pick from Johnny Marr. Like 20 years ago or something like that, or 15 years ago, I interviewed him for another music magazine that I was writing for back then. And I'm not a really good guitar player. I just know a few chords. But after the interview was over, Johnny Marr said to me, "You are a guitar player. I know you are a guitar player." And I couldn't really, he already put this. He made this and put his guitar pick out of his pocket before I really could answer and tell him, I know a few chords, but I wouldn't say I'm a good guitar player. And he signed it to me and gave it to me like, "This is from me to you. This is like passing on the torch." So maybe he thought I would be like a new Johnny Marr or something, and I didn't want to be honest and say, actually I'm not really a good guitar player. But he thought I'm a guitar player because of the questions I asked, because I asked some guitar related questions, and maybe he thought they were clever. So he signed this to me and gave me his guitar pick. So this is it's a great souvenir from memory from my meeting with Johnny Marr. Great guy. It was a great interview. He's a very nice person, and he's a genius. Like Morris is a genius, and also the rhythm section of the Smiths, great rhythm section. So it's, like I said, one of the best bands of the 80s. My favorite band of the 80s. And yeah, this was my ranking of all the Smiths albums. Thank you very much for watching.